Okay, hello, my name is Hernan Rodriguez, and this is our project presentation. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about the 7 steps to design and develop a method. In this case, we're going to take an example of the buy land method. The first step would be to define the problem. In this case, the problem that we defined is to check if the user input that we're going to receive for this method is valid, and then if it's valid, we're going to continue with the logic of the method. So we defined that problem, and then we defined other 2 things. One is the method prologue, that is a set of comments on top of the method that shows the purpose of the method, the parameters that we're going to receive, and the return value. Then we have the signature of the method that has the public access modifier, the return type, the name of the method, and the parameters. The next slide. Okay, for step 2, we developed a test matrix. In this step, what we did is we listed the inputs that the method is going to receive, the output that is going to return, and then we defined 6 scenarios that could happen with different values for this method. And the first one is a valid scenario. Then we have 3 invalid scenarios and 2 boundary scenarios. Okay, and the next step would be to develop the algorithm. In this case, what we did is we listed a set of steps in pseudocode to write down what the method would execute step by step. So if we see the steps 1, 2, and 3 are validations to check if the user input is okay, and if all the validations go through, then it will continue to steps 4 and 5. That's where the acres owned is increased and the wheat in store is decreased. And then in the last steps, step 6 is where we return the output.
Hi, my name is Shiana, and this is step 4. Step 4 is test the algorithm. In this, we are going to test all algorithms. For example, we have case 1, where across to buy is 50. So if we see in step 1 in our algorithm, we see across to buy have to be bigger than 0, so we can continue with the step 2. In this case, across to buy is more than 0, so we can continue with the step 2. In our step 2, we have another if statement where weight in store have to be bigger than acres to buy per price per acre. Again, in this case, this number is bigger, so we can continue with the next step. So we have to do this so in order so we can return the acres owned. In this case 2, for example, acres to buy is minus 50, so we can pass our step 1. So we are going to return a -1. The same happened with case 3, where wheat in store is less than acres to buy per price, so we can continue, and we are going to return a -1. For step 5 is translate the code, translate the algorithm into a code. So first we have the method prologue, usually goes before the signature, and we also have the algorithm. As you can see in our algorithm, we have a local variable, and that local variable is referenced to the crop data object, so we can pass the argument to the method. We also have the if statement with the condition who's going to be evaluated, and we have the return. Depending on our if statement, if true or false, we are going to return a -1, or we are going to continue with the next statement. Step 6, we have to create a unit test to check our code. So here we create a unit test. We also complete the unit test with storing value, different value, so we can check we have an expect result. If the expect result is true, I mean it's valid, we're going to pass the test. But if our expect result is different to our test, we need to check what is going on and change it before we continue with the step 7.
Hi, my name is Carly, and for the final step, we do a commit and deploy your changes. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to commit your changes to the local repository, and then we're going to pull any changes made first, just because we want to make sure we don't delete anyone's code. And then after we've done that, resolved any issues there may or may not be, we then push it back to the repository so that everyone has access to the new code.
Okay, for selection statements, here's an example of the do action method. So in the do action method, we receive a number between 1 and 6. And depending on the number that we receive, we have to execute a method in each case. So there's 6 possible scenarios. So for this, we choose to develop the method with a switch statement. So in this case, the switch receives the number, and then we defined in each case what method is going to be executed. So this is why switch is very handy in this situation. So in case 1, we execute view goals. In case 2, we execute view map help, and so on and so on. So this is a good example of the switch statement.
So my selection statement is the if statement. We use if statement when we have one true action. That means if the action is false, we are going to ignore the block and we are going to continue with the next statement. This is a good example. For example, our first if statement, we have accuracy on, have to be minus or less the accuracy to plan. If there is minus, we are going to return a -1. But if it's bigger, we are going to skip the if statement and we are going to continue with the next statement. And this happens the same with the next statement. Every time we have a if statement, we have a condition, and we have to see if that condition is true or false. And depending on that, we are going to continue with the next statement, or we are going to return something back.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the if-else statement, and building on what Gianna explained about the if statement, we also have the else statement, which pretty much means if you have a condition that doesn't match with that if statement, there's going to be another condition that will match your code that will allow it to continue to run.
Okay, for the unit tests, for example, we had to test the feed people method. To do this, what we did is go back to the test matrix, and we defined 5 scenarios. So in this method, we receive 2 parameters, wheat for people and crop data. And then we return wheat and storage, another number. So when we go to the code, we write down the unit tests. That what we do in those tests is set the values that we defined in the test matrix, and then we run the method and check if the expected result matches the actual result. So in this case, we see the first example is the valid example. Then the second and third examples are the invalid examples. And the fourth and fifth here are the boundary examples. And here we can see that after running the tests, the expected results matches with the actual results running the test. So the test run successfully.
All right, and for to buy land, we had 2 parameters there. It was acres to buy and crop data. We ended up returning at the end acres owned, and we had to watch out for a few things with this code. The first being acres to buy couldn't be below 0. and we had to make sure we had enough wheat in store to buy the acres, and we had to also make sure that we had enough people for the amount of acres we were buying, as shown in our cases. And in our algorithm, it shows us going through that logic as well. If acres to buy is less than 0, we have to enter a new value, and it's just going through those different steps, letting us know if it's okay or if we need to enter a new value. And in our test, you can see that we have an expected result, and we also have the result that we get. So if those match, the test passed. And as we can see here, it passed.
So my unit test is plant crops. So here we also have 2 different parameters. We also have a return, and we have 6 different test cases. The thing we have to make sure in this method, we have to make sure the acres or land have to be a positive number. We also have to make sure the city have this much land to make plant, and we also have to make sure we have enough wheat in store to plant this many acres. So here we have the code with the signature, we have our local variable. Also, we have a setter method. Once the code is run, we are going to keep the value of the wheat in store. So that's why we have a setter method, and we have the return, which is going to be the wheat in store. Here is the test. So the test is going to be filled, in this case, with the valid values. So we have acres to plant 6, and so going on. And we have the test result. If the result is correct, we're going to continue with the next test, and that means it's passed. So here we have all our 6 tests passed.
All right, so going into scope and lifespan, scope is defined by a block, which begins and ends with curly braces, and every block you create, you're also creating scopes. We also have to talk about lifespan, which is usually referring to a variable within a method, and it just tells you how long the variable lasts or lives. And so if the method is going through code, that variable is in its lifespan. But the moment the method ends, so does the variable.
Okay, so when we define a method, or we call a method, we usually pass in parameters or arguments. And there's 2 scenarios where we can pass a parameter as a value or as a reference. And the difference mainly is that passing a value is passing in a primitive value, like a string, a number, a boolean, etc. But if we are saying that we're passing a reference, what we do is we pass an object instance. So we can see an example here in this code. We call the sell land method, and we're passing 3 parameters. The price and to sell variables, as you can see in the code, are actually numbers, are variables that are integers. So these are value. But the third parameter, the crop data, actually is a global variable that references to an object. So this would be a case of passing a reference.
And this has been our team presentation. If you have any questions, just comment below. Bye.
Goodbye.